My name is Zoe Carter. I'm 32 years old, and this is the story of how my life burned to the ground so I could finally build a new one. On my 32nd birthday, my family and my husband, Ryan, took me to Glass Haven, a restaurant in Seattle with sweeping views of the water. The lights of the city glittered below, but they felt a million miles away. There was a knot in my stomach. I thought it was just the usual anxiety that came with family gatherings, the familiar feeling of bracing myself. I had no idea it was a premonition. After the waiter cleared our appetizer plates, my younger sister, Chloe, stood up. She had a self-satisfied smile on her face, the one she always wore when she was about to become the center of attention. She placed a perfectly manicured hand on her still flat stomach. The diamond on her finger, a gift from our parents for graduating with a useless degree, caught the light. "I have an announcement," she said, her voice ringing with false sweetness. The table went quiet. My mother looked at her with pure adoration. My father beamed, ready to applaud his perfect daughter. Ryan just watched, his face a mask of neutrality. "I'm pregnant," Chloe declared. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. Then she turned her eyes directly to me. "It's Ryan's." Gasps filled the small private room. The clinking of silverware stopped. My mother's smile froze and then morphed into something I couldn't read. Shock, maybe, or something colder. My father's jaw dropped. Everyone stared at me. They were all waiting for the same thing. They were waiting for me to shatter, to scream, to cry, to crumble into a million pieces right there on the expensive white tablecloth. But I didn't. I just looked at my sister, and my husband, and the family who had built my cage, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Nothing. Just a calm, quiet stillness. The storm had finally hit, and I was still standing. But before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe and drop a comment to let me know where you are watching from. To understand why they all expected me to break, you have to understand the ecosystem of my family. In the Carter household, every member had a function, a role assigned so early we never thought to question it. My sister Chloe was the sun. She was bright, dazzling, and everything revolved around her. My parents were the astronomers, their lives dedicated to tracking her orbit, celebrating her light, and shielding her from any passing asteroids. My role was gravity. I was the unseen force that kept the whole system from spinning apart. I held everything together, quietly, thanklessly, and invisibly. This wasn't a role I chose. It was imprinted on me. My earliest memories are not of being coddled, but of being praised for my self-sufficiency. "Look at Zoe," my mother would say to visiting relatives as I, a 5-year-old, carefully poured my own juice, concentrating so as not to spill a drop. "She's such a little adult." Meanwhile, Chloe, a year younger, would be wailing because her juice was in the wrong color cup, and both my parents would rush to solve this monumental crisis. I learned then my needs were a nuisance, but my competence was a comfort to them, so I became competent. It was the only way to earn a sliver of their attention. The most vivid illustration of our dynamic happened on my 10th birthday. For 6 months leading up to it, I had spoken of nothing but a single glorious object, a cerulean blue bicycle with a white wicker basket. I had a picture of it, cut from a catalog, taped to my bedroom wall. I dreamed about it. I imagined the wind in my hair as I rode around our neighborhood, a taste of freedom I desperately craved. It was more than a bike. It was an escape pod. On the morning of my birthday, I practically vibrated with anticipation as I came down the stairs. A single, large, rectangular box wrapped in plain brown paper sat by my chair. It was the wrong shape for a bike, but I told myself it was just clever wrapping. My parents smiled. A placid, generic smile. "Happy birthday, sweetie," my dad said. I tore the paper off. Underneath was a full 24-volume set of the World Book Encyclopedia. My heart sank with a physical thud. I looked up at them, my confusion and disappointment a lump in my throat. "For your schoolwork," my mom said, her voice bright and proud. "You're so smart, Zoe. You're our little scholar. We wanted to give you a tool for your future. You're the responsible one," my dad added, patting my head. "This is a gift that will last. Not some toy you'll get tired of," I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them that I was 10, that I didn't want to be responsible, that I just wanted a bike. But I saw the self-congratulatory look on their faces. They truly believed they had done a wonderful, thoughtful thing. They had seen my essence, quiet, studious, serious, and given a gift that reinforced it. Complaining would have been ungrateful. It would have been messy. So I did what I always did. I swallowed my feelings and said, "Thank you. It's great." An hour later, the doorbell rang. 2 delivery men were wrestling a massive object through the front door. It was a piano. A gleaming, black, upright piano that looked like a whale in our small living room. Chloe, who had been sulking because my birthday was taking up too much of the morning's attention, suddenly lit up. "What's that?" she demanded. "Surprise!" My parents chimed in unison. "It's for you, sweetie," my mother cooed, rushing to Chloe's side. "We just felt you had an artistic soul. We have to nurture it." Chloe hadn't asked for a piano. She had never shown the slightest interest in music. But she ran to it, slammed her hands on the keys, creating a horrible cacophony, and giggled. My parents applauded as if she had just performed a concerto. The rest of my birthday was forgotten. The entire day was about the piano. Where to put it? Finding a piano teacher. Chloe pretending to play it for my grandparents over the phone. My encyclopedias sat in their box, a monument to my practicality. The piano became the new centerpiece of our home, a testament to Chloe's whims. She took lessons for 6 months, complained it was boring, and never touched it again. For the next decade, it sat there, gathering dust, a constant silent reminder of my 10th birthday. This pattern repeated itself endlessly, becoming more pronounced as we grew older. In high school, I was a dedicated student, focused on getting the grades I needed for a scholarship. College was my only way out. I was studying for my final exams one week, locked in my room with textbooks and notes, when a wail erupted from Chloe's room. She had been dumped by a boy she'd been dating for all of 3 weeks. Instantly, the house was on high alert. My mother rushed into her room. My father paced outside her door. I tried to shut it out, to focus on the history chapter in front of me, but my mother soon appeared in my doorway. "Zoe, honey, Chloe is heartbroken. Could you make her some tea?" "Mom, I have an exam tomorrow," I said, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. "I know, and your exams are very important," she said, her voice dripping with condescending sympathy. "But your sister is in real pain. She's so sensitive. You're the strong one. You can handle the pressure. Just take a small break for her." A small break turned into the entire evening. I made the tea. I sat on the edge of her bed while she sobbed dramatically. I listened to my mother tell her the boy was a fool who didn't deserve her. My dad went out and came back with 3 tubs of her favorite ice cream. My studying was forgotten. I ended up staying awake until 3 a.m., my eyes burning with exhaustion to finish my work. I got a B on that exam. Chloe was dating a new boy a week later. No one ever mentioned it again. The ultimate burden came when I was 16. Our parents' business, a small landscaping company, hit a rough patch. They were good at plants, not at finances. One night, I came into the kitchen to find my mother at the table, her head in her hands, a pile of angry-looking red-enveloped bills in front of her. She looked so lost, so defeated. "What's wrong?" I asked. She looked up, and instead of shielding me from the problem, she unleashed it. She explained everything, the late payments, the threatening letters, the fear of losing the business, and then she pushed the pile of bills towards me. "You're so good with numbers, Zoe," she said, her voice thick with unshed tears. "You always know what to do." So, at 16, my evenings were no longer about homework or friends. They were about becoming a miniature accountant. I learned the art of financial triage. I made spreadsheets. I called creditors and negotiated payment plans, lowering my voice to sound older, more authoritative. I felt a strange mixture of terror and pride. I was saving them. I was the strong one. The real kicker came one Friday night. I had just managed to balance the books for the month, figuring out a way to keep the lights on and pay their most critical supplier. I was exhausted but relieved. Chloe waltzed in, dressed for a party. "Mom, can I have $50 for the concert tickets?" My mother hesitated, looking at me. I knew we didn't have $50 to spare. It was the exact amount I had set aside for the gas bill. I opened my mouth to say something, but my mother shot me a look, a plea. "Don't make this difficult. Of course, honey," she said to Chloe, pulling the cash from an envelope I had marked Utilities. "Have a wonderful time." Chloe took the money without a word of thanks and danced out the door. My mother turned to me, her expression a mixture of guilt and justification. "She's had a tough week. She needed a release. We'll figure out the gas bill. You'll think of something. You always do." I didn't say anything. I just went back to my room and looked at the picture of the blue bicycle, which was still taped to my wall. I had never taken it down. It was a reminder of a girl whose wants were simple and who had learned over and over that her wants didn't matter. So when I met Ryan and he listened to me, when he asked about my day and seemed genuinely interested in the answer, it felt like a miracle. He called me his rock, and I didn't recognize it for the burden it was. I thought he was seeing my strength as a virtue to be cherished, not a resource to be exploited. He promised me a life where we would be a team, where I would finally be taken care of. Marriage wasn't just a commitment to him. It was my declaration of independence, my escape from the gravitational pull of my family. I was so sure I was flying into a new galaxy. I was just being pulled into a black hole. Our wedding day felt like a scene from a movie I was watching, not a life I was living. It was held on a manicured lawn overlooking Lake Washington, under a sky so painfully blue it looked fake. Ryan stood at the altar, handsome and steady, and when I walked towards him, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't realized I was missing my entire life. This, I thought, is safety. This is the beginning of my real life. Of course, my family treated the event less as my wedding and more as a stage for their usual drama. Chloe, as my maid of honor, had vetoed 3 different dress colors before settling on a shade of lavender she claimed washed her out, a complaint she voiced to anyone who would listen. My mother spent the morning fussing over Chloe's hair, not mine, worried that the humidity would ruin her perfect curls. The most telling moment came during the reception toasts. My father gave a generic, rambling speech. Then Chloe took the microphone. She looked beautiful, and she knew it. She smiled a dazzling, predatory smile. "For as long as I can remember," she began, "Zoe has been the one to clean up my messes." The guests chuckled politely. "There was this one time at summer camp," she continued, launching into an excruciatingly detailed story about getting a stomach flu in me, at age 9, patiently cleaning up after her in our shared cabin because she was too delicate to handle it. "That's just Zoe," she concluded, raising her glass. "Always there to take care of the messy stuff so the rest of us don't have to. We'd all be lost without her." "To Zoe!" the room applauded. Ryan squeezed my hand. I knew he thought it was a sweet, if slightly awkward, tribute, but I heard the real message. It wasn't a toast. It was a reminder of my function. Even here, on my wedding day, I was being celebrated not for who I was, but for what I did for others. I smiled, kissed Ryan, and pushed the feeling down. Today was about us, about our future. And for a while, that future felt bright. We bought a cozy 2-bedroom house in Ballard with a big backyard and an old cherry tree. The first thing we did was paint the smaller bedroom a soft, buttery yellow. "The baby's room," Ryan had said, his voice filled with a hopeful warmth that melted all my defenses. We spent our weekends at farmers markets and hiking trails. We were happy. Ryan was everything my family wasn't. Attentive, appreciative, and calm. He made me feel seen. Then we decided to start trying for a family. My simple, ordinary dream of children felt so close, so attainable. I pictured our lives, our quiet little house filled with the noise and chaos of a child. I wanted it with an ache that was primal. The first 6 months were a private, hopeful adventure. Then the hope started to curdle into anxiety. The monthly cycle of optimism, followed by the stark single line on a pregnancy test, became a recurring heartbreak. It transformed the most intimate part of our marriage into a clinical exercise governed by calendars and thermometers. Each failure felt like a judgment. My body, which had always been so reliable and strong, was failing me at its most fundamental purpose. The old voices from my childhood began to whisper in my ear. I was the responsible one, the one who was supposed to get things right. And here I was, failing. I started to feel a creeping, familiar shame. I tried to hide the extent of my despair from Ryan. I didn't want to be a burden, but he always seemed to know. He'd find me quietly crying in the bathroom and wrap his arms around me. "Hey," he'd whisper into my hair. "Don't do this to yourself. It'll happen when it's meant to happen. We're a team, remember? It's not on you, it's on us." His words were a lifeline. I clung to them. When we finally went to a doctor, the process was humiliating. I was poked, prodded, and scanned. I answered invasive questions about my cycle, my history, my body. With each test, I prayed for an answer, even a bad one. An answer would at least be something to fix. But every test came back with the same frustrating result. Normal. "There's nothing physically wrong with you, Zoe," the fertility specialist said, her tone professional but not unkind. "Sometimes it's just unexplained." Unexplained. A word that sounded like a synonym for your fault. I felt like a machine with a ghost in it, a perfect-looking device that simply refused to work for no discernible reason. The weight of that unexplained settled entirely on my shoulders. Ryan had been tested early on, a quick, simple procedure he'd complained about for a week, and the doctor had told us his results were fine. So the problem had to be me. The struggle changed me. I started avoiding friends with new babies. I dreaded family gatherings where my mother would ask, in a stage whisper, "Any news yet?" Chloe was the worst. "You're probably just trying too hard, Zoe," she'd say with a patronizing air. "You need to relax. Look at you, you're so tense all the time." My parents would nod in agreement. One Christmas, after 2 years of trying, we had a particularly bad experience. A cousin announced her pregnancy, and I had to flee to the bathroom to stifle my sobs. Ryan found me there. He held my face in his hands. his expression full of a pain that I thought was for me, for us. "I hate this," he said, his voice raw. "I hate what this is doing to you. I swear, Zoe, if we could just have a baby, everything would be okay. But even if we can't, I love you. That's all that matters." I believed him. I believed every word. His steadfast presence was the only thing keeping me sane. I saw his unwavering support as proof of his love, a shield against my family's casual cruelty and my own crushing sense of failure. He was my partner in this struggle, my fellow soldier in the trenches of infertility. The truth was so much worse. He wasn't in the trench with me. He was standing on the edge, watching me suffer in a battle he knew I could never win on my own, all while holding the one piece of information that would have set me free. He let me carry the weight of our childlessness alone, letting it crush me, because it served his own secret, selfish purpose. He wasn't my partner. He was the architect of my pain. The night the world ended, it began with the comforting scent of roast chicken and rosemary. A steady gray rain was falling outside, the kind of Seattle weather that makes you grateful for the warmth of your own home. The house was quiet, a sanctuary. Ryan was working late again, a common occurrence lately. He was chasing a big promotion at his architectural firm, he'd said. I was proud of his ambition, his drive. I saw it as him working hard for us, for our future, for the family we were so desperately trying to build. I remember feeling a quiet contentment as I pulled the chicken from the oven, its skin a perfect golden brown. I was making a nice meal. I was a good wife. My life was stable. These were the lies I told myself. I carried my laptop to the kitchen counter, planning to find a new recipe for roasted potatoes while the chicken rested. Our shared tablet was closer, so I picked it up instead. It was already awake, the screen glowing. Ryan's email was open. He was always forgetting to close his apps. I never thought anything of it. We had no secrets. That was another lie. I barely glanced at the list of messages. My eyes were scanning for the web browser icon when a subject line snagged my attention. It was from Chloe. That alone wasn't unusual. They communicated occasionally about family things. But the words were stark and strange against the backdrop of junk mail and work memos. Subject, our plan. My fingers froze over the screen. A sudden cold jolt went through me, sharp and unpleasant. Our plan. My mind scrambled for an innocent explanation. My 32nd birthday was in 2 weeks. Of course, they were planning a surprise party. It was sweet. Ryan knew how much I hated surprises, but he was probably doing it for me anyway. Chloe was helping. It was a nice thought, but a familiar annoyance flickered. Even my own surprise party would have to be co-managed by my sister, but the cold feeling in my gut didn't go away. It intensified. It felt less like annoyance and more like dread. I hesitated for a full minute, my thumb hovering over the screen. Don't open it. It's his private email. Just close it and look up the recipe. But I couldn't. It was a door, slightly ajar, and I had the terrifying feeling that my entire life was on the other side. I pressed down. The email opened. The world didn't stop. It shattered. The email was short. Its brevity was part of its violence. It was written with a chilling, casual efficiency, like a memo outlining corporate strategy. I had to read it 3 times before the words fully penetrated the shield of my disbelief. Ryan, it began, just confirming everything for the 28th. Dinner at Glass Haven at 7. Mom and Dad are making the reservation. I'll make the announcement after the appetizers. I think that will have the biggest impact. Each word was a hammer blow. My birthday, the restaurant I loved, my parents were in on it, and an announcement. A cold sweat broke out on my neck as I read the next paragraph. You need to make sure you act surprised, but then supportive of me. You can go to Zoe afterwards and do the whole "I'm so sorry" thing. The key is for everyone to see her break down. Once she has a full-blown public meltdown, it'll be so much easier for you to play the sympathetic husband who was pushed into this by a desperate woman, me, lol, and a wife who just couldn't give him a family. My breath hitched. I put a hand on the counter to steady myself. A wife who just couldn't give him a family. They were using my deepest, most private pain as a public relations tool. They weren't just betraying me. They were weaponizing my grief. The LOL felt like a knife twist, a giggle at the edge of my grave. Chloe's casual cruelty was familiar, but seeing it laid out in a strategic plan with Ryan as her co-conspirator was dizzying. He was supposed to be my safe harbor. Then I read the final lines. The ones that extinguished the last spark of hope that this was some kind of horrible misunderstanding. She'll be humiliated. She won't know what to do. She'll fold. She always does. Then you can move in with me the next week. Smooth transition. Everything is falling into place. She'll fold. She always does. The kitchen, my warm, safe kitchen, suddenly felt like a morgue. The air grew thick and cold. I couldn't breathe. It was a perfect encapsulation of my entire existence. I was the reliable one, the strong one, the one who absorbed pain quietly and efficiently so everyone else could move on. My sister and my husband were so confident in my lifelong training that they had built their entire plan around it. They weren't just expecting me to break. They were counting on it. It was a necessary step in their smooth transition. My phone buzzed on the counter beside the tablet. The screen lit up. It was a text from Ryan. "Hey, stuck in traffic. Be home soon. Love you." The casual "love you" was the most violent part of it all. It was a lie so profound it made my head spin. I looked around my kitchen. At the photos on the fridge, Ryan and me smiling on a hike, our wedding picture. At the yellow paint peeking out from the hallway, the color of a nursery that would never exist. Our whole life was a lie. He had held me while I cried about our infertility, all while knowing this was his endgame. Every word of comfort, every reassuring touch had been a strategic move in a long, cruel game. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Sound seemed to have vanished from the world. A profound, terrifying stillness descended. It was the silence of deep space. In that moment, the woman who lived in this house, who loved her husband and roasted chickens for him, died. She just evaporated. And in her place, something new and cold and hard began to form. They expected me to fold. They had mistaken my capacity for pain as a weakness. They were about to find out it was my greatest strength. For what felt like an hour, I was a statue in my own kitchen. The only thing moving was the rain sliding down the window panes. My mind was a white-hot blank. The words from the email were branded on the inside of my eyelids, a looping slideshow of cruelty, public meltdown, a wife who couldn't give him a family. She'll fold. She always does. The cheerful beep of the oven timer, signaling that the chicken was done resting, was a shrill intrusion from a world I no longer belonged to. I silenced it with a numb press of my finger. My body moved before my mind did. I walked to the sink, turned on the tap, and methodically washed my hands, scrubbing them as if to remove the filth of the betrayal. I looked at my reflection in the dark window. The woman staring back was a stranger. Her face was pale, her eyes dark and hollow. There were no tears. Tears were a luxury, an emotional release I couldn't afford. Tears were what they wanted, what they expected. Tears were surrender. The initial shock, that paralyzing, heart-stopping blow, began to recede, and in the vacuum it left behind, something else began to rise. It was a rage so pure and so cold it felt like ice water flooding my veins. This wasn't the hot, messy anger that makes you scream and break things. It was a silent, focused fury. It was the anger of a lifetime of being underestimated, of being the designated shock absorber for everyone else's selfishness. For 32 years, I had dutifully played my part. I had been strong, responsible, and quiet. I had folded. I had always folded, and they had built their perfect little plan on the bedrock of that certainty. A single thought, clear as a bell, cut through the noise in my head. I will not fold. It wasn't a wish. It was a vow. My hand, steady now, reached for my phone. My thumb scrolled past Ryan's name, past my mother's, past Chloe's. There was only one person I could call. The one person who had never asked me to be strong, but had simply been strong alongside me. Mia. She answered with her usual buoyant, "Hey Z, what's up?" I opened my mouth, but the words wouldn't come out. A strangled noise, a sort of dry sob without tears was all I could manage. Her tone changed instantly, sharpening with alarm. "Zoe, are you okay? Talk to me, what happened?" I took a breath, anchoring myself to the sound of her voice. "I found an email, Mia," I said, and my own voice sounded foreign, a low, flat monotone. "It's from Chloe, to Ryan," and then I read it to her. I read every single venomous word, from the dinner reservation to the LOL, to the final damning sentence. My voice didn't shake. Reading it aloud made it real, transforming it from a nightmare into a piece of evidence. When I finished, the silence on the other end of the line was absolute. It wasn't the silence of someone searching for comforting words. It was the silence of processing, of pure, unadulterated fury. Finally, Mia spoke, and her voice was dangerously quiet. Those absolute methodical monsters. They put it in writing. The arrogance is stunning. She took a sharp breath. Okay, Zoe, listen to me. Right now you are in shock. The grief and the pain are going to come for you, and you need to let them, but not right now. Right now we think. Right now we plan. Plan what? I whispered. It's over, Mia. Everything is over. No, she shot back, her voice like a whip. It's not over. They wrote a script for your destruction, Z. They have handed you their entire playbook. They think you are a victim, and they are counting on you to play that part. A victim is powerless. You are not powerless. You have information. That is power. Her words started to penetrate the icy numbness. Information is power. They've built a trap for you, she continued, her voice gaining speed and intensity. They're all going to be sitting at that restaurant, waiting for the show to start, waiting for you to cry and fall apart. The single most powerful thing you can do is not give them the reaction they expect. What do I do? You do nothing, Mia said, and I could hear the fierce intelligence in her voice, the strategist emerging. You act like you know nothing. You survive the next 2 weeks. You smile at your husband. You are the loving, unsuspecting wife. And in those 2 weeks, we dig. There is no way this is the only secret, Zoe. Betrayals this big have foundations. We need to find them. They want to turn your birthday dinner into a trap? Fine. Then don't fold, Zoe. Turn their trap into your battlefield. Turn their trap into your battlefield. The phrase landed in my soul and took root. A battlefield. A war. For my whole life, I had been a pacifist in the face of emotional onslaughts. I had absorbed every blow, every slight, every injustice because I thought that was strength. Mia's words illuminated a new truth. That wasn't strength. It was endurance. Real strength was fighting back. A profound shift happened inside me in that moment. The grief and the heartbreak were still there. A vast, dark ocean. But on the surface of that ocean, a thick sheet of ice was forming. It was cold, hard, and clear. I looked at my reflection in the window again. The woman staring back wasn't a stranger anymore. I recognized her. She was the 16-year-old who balanced her parents' books. She was the 10-year-old who swallowed her disappointment and thanked her parents for a gift she didn't want. She was the girl who had learned to be methodical, disciplined, and observant. My family had spent my entire life forging me into a tool for their own convenience. They had no idea they had actually forged a weapon. When the sound of Ryan's key turned in the lock an hour later, I was sitting on the couch, flipping through a magazine. The table was set. The scent of chicken was in the air. My heart was a block of ice in my chest, but I arranged my face into a mask of placid warmth. He walked in, dropping his keys in the bowl by the door. Hey, sorry I'm so late. He came over and kissed my forehead. His lips were warm against my skin, and I had to fight the urge to recoil. Long day? I asked, my voice even and calm. The worst, he sighed, sinking onto the couch beside me. This project is killing me. He looked at me, his face a perfect picture of loving concern. How was your day? Everything okay? I looked right back into the eyes of the man who had co-authored the plan for my public execution. The man who had held me while I cried, knowing he was the source of a pain I couldn't even imagine yet, and I smiled. Everything's fine, I said. I was just thinking about my birthday. We should do something special. He smiled back, a genuine, relieved smile. He thought he was safe. He thought I was the same woman he'd left that morning. The war had started, and the first rule of this war was that my enemy would not know he was my enemy until it was far too late. The 2 weeks between the discovery of the email and my birthday dinner were the longest of my life. I moved through my days in a state of suspended animation, a ghost in my own home. I was playing the greatest role of my life, Zoe, the loving, unsuspecting wife. I made dinner. I asked Ryan about his day. I slept beside him in our bed, my body a rigid line, careful not to let any part of me touch him. Every word of affection from him, every casual touch was like acid on my skin. He was so confident, so oblivious. He was a man walking through a minefield he had planted himself, utterly convinced of his own safety. My evenings were my own. Ryan continued to work late, a phrase I now understood to be a euphemism for his time with Chloe. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, my real work began. My sanctuary was Mia's apartment. It was a bright, airy space filled with plants and books, a stark contrast to the suffocating atmosphere of my own house. Her home became my war room. Okay, Mia said on the first night, setting 2 mugs of tea on her coffee table. They have a plan. We need a better one. Their plan is built on emotion. Your emotional breakdown. Ours needs to be built on facts. Cold, hard, undeniable facts. The email is a fact, I said, my voice hollow. It is. It's the motive. It's the conspiracy. But it's your word against theirs. They'll say you're hysterical, that you misinterpreted it. They'll try to gaslight you. We need something they can't deny. Something clinical. She leaned forward, her eyes sharp. Zoe, think. In all the years you guys were trying, all the doctors, did Ryan ever see anyone on his own? Any tests? Anything at all? I sifted through the painful haze of memories, through years of sterile examination rooms and quiet, disappointing drives home. At the very beginning, I said slowly, the memory surfacing like a relic from a shipwreck. Before we went to the fertility clinic together, his company changed their insurance. They were offering a free, comprehensive health screening as part of the new plan. He went. He said it was just a bunch of routine blood work and physical stuff. When I asked him if they checked his fertility, he just laughed it off. He said, "Everything's in working order, Captain." He said the results were all fine. Which clinic was it? Mia asked, her fingers already hovering over her laptop keyboard. Cascade Clinic, I think. Downtown. Okay, she said, typing. That's a start. Getting official medical records is nearly impossible. Privacy laws are ironclad. But we weren't trying to build a legal case. Not yet. We just needed confirmation. For the next 3 nights, we hit dead end after dead end. We tried searching for an old online patient portal, but any account he might have had was long dormant. We debated and discarded a dozen crazy ideas. Then, on the 4th night, I had another flash of memory. It was so mundane I had almost forgotten it. His briefcase, I said, sitting bolt upright on Mia's couch. A few years ago, the lock on his briefcase broke. He was a slob with it, just shoved everything inside. I had to clean it out to take it to the repair shop. There were old papers in there, insurance EOBs, receipts. I remember a packet from Cascade Clinic. Did you throw them out? No, I said, my heart starting to pound. I never throw out financial or medical papers. I put them all in a file box. The one for old tax records. It's in the attic. The next day was a Saturday. Ryan was supposedly at the office, getting ahead for the week. The moment he left, I was pulling down the rickety attic stairs. The attic was hot and smelled of dust and old wood. In the corner, under a stack of winter blankets, was a row of cardboard file boxes. I found the one marked Old Records 2018-2020 and wrestled it downstairs. My hands trembled as I sifted through the files. Old tax returns, car maintenance receipts, credit card statements, and then I saw it. A thick envelope with the Cascade Clinic logo. I ripped it open. Inside was a dense packet of papers filled with medical jargon and numbers. Most of it was standard blood work results. But stapled to the very back was a single sheet of paper with a different heading. Semen Analysis Reportee carried it to the kitchen table and smoothed it out. Mia was on speakerphone, a silent, supportive presence. I started to read. Patient, Ryan Carter, date of collection, October 17th, 2019. This was just 2 months before our first appointment at the fertility clinic. 2 months before I subjected myself to the first of dozens of invasive tests. I scanned the columns of numbers, volume, concentration, morphology. I didn't know what most of them meant, but then my eyes landed on one word, and the world stopped turning. Motility, 0% beside it. In the normal range column, it said 40%. I read the line again, and again. 0, not low, not poor, 0. At the bottom of the page was a section titled Pathologist's Notes. The words were cold, clinical, and absolute. No motile sperm observed. Findings are consistent with a diagnosis of azoospermia. Patient is functionally sterile. Follow-up consultation and potential genetic screening recommended. Functionally sterile. The paper slipped from my fingers. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles white. A wave of nausea so profound it made the room spin washed over me. Zoe? Zoe, what is it? Mia's voice crackled from the phone, distant and small. I couldn't answer. My mind was reeling, flashing back through years of carefully constructed lies. I saw Ryan, holding my hand in the waiting room of the fertility clinic, his face a mask of concern as I waited to have my blood drawn again. I saw him rubbing my back as I cried after another negative pregnancy test, whispering, "It's not your fault, honey. These things just take time." I saw him at that Christmas party, his voice raw with emotion as he told me he loved me, even if we could never have the family we dreamed of. Every one of those moments, every single memory that I had cherished as proof of his love and our partnership, was a lie. A monstrous, calculated, and sadistic lie. This wasn't just about the affair with my sister. This wasn't just about leaving me. This was about years of deliberate, sustained psychological torture. He knew. From the very beginning, he knew. He knew our dream was impossible. He knew the problem wasn't unexplained. He knew it wasn't me. And he watched me. He watched me inject myself with hormones. He watched me break down month after month. He watched me blame my own body, watched me carry the crushing weight of our shared dream as if it were my failure alone. He let me believe I was broken. He let me slice open my own soul month after month, looking for a flaw that he knew was never there. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. It was a cruelty so deep and so vast I couldn't comprehend it. It was the act of a monster. "Zoe, talk to me." Mia's voice was insistent now, pulling me back from the brink. I took a shaking breath. "He's sterile," I whispered. "It says it right here. Zero sperm motility. He's known since 2019. There was a long silence on the phone. Then, Mia's voice, no longer strategic, just filled with a pure, quiet rage. That man needs to burn, she said. A fire started in my chest. It wasn't the hot, messy fire of rage. It was a cold, white-hot flame of pure clarity. The pain was still there, a great howling wound, but the fire was cauterizing it, turning it from a vulnerability into a weapon. The man who had pretended to be my rock, my partner, my protector, had been my torturer all along. He had let me suffer for years to provide himself with the perfect cover story, the perfect excuse to leave me for my sister. He was building his narrative, brick by painful brick on my back. I picked up the piece of paper. It felt heavy like a slab of stone. This was more than a medical report. It was a verdict. Mia, I said, my voice no longer a whisper but a low, steady flame. You were right. The email was the motive. This is the murder weapon. The medical report changed the equation. My mission, which had started as a desperate act of self-preservation, now felt like a quest for a specific and brutal form of justice. The betrayal was no longer just about infidelity and a broken heart. It was about years of calculated emotional abuse. But Mia, ever the pragmatist, believed there was more. A lie that big is never a solo act, Zoe, she said 2 nights later, as we sat in her apartment, the medical report now safely locked away. A man who can look you in the eye every day while you inject yourself with hormones for a baby he knows is impossible is not a man who draws the line at financial fidelity. He's a sociopath. And sociopaths need resources. What do you mean? I mean this new life he's planning with Chloe. It costs money. A baby, a house, Chloe's expensive tastes. Ryan makes a good salary, but is it that good? Where is the money coming from? The question hung in the air. I thought about his late nights at the office, his talk of a big project. I had seen it as ambition. Now, I saw it through a different lens. We need a private investigator, Mia stated, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. The idea seemed drastic, like something from a movie. A PI? Mia, that's crazy. And it must cost a fortune. It's saner than letting him get away with this, she countered. And it's cheaper than a lifetime of wondering. Consider it an investment in your future. We'll find the money. I'll help you. The next day, Mia found a firm with a discreet reputation. I made the call from a pay-as-you-go burner phone we'd bought. My voice was tight with nerves as I scheduled a consultation. I felt a strange mix of shame and resolve. I was a 32-year-old woman hiring a stranger to investigate the man I had promised to spend my life with. The PI's office was in a nondescript building downtown. The investigator was a woman in her 50s named Carol. She had short, no-nonsense gray hair and eyes that seemed to see right through me. She didn't offer sympathy. She offered efficiency. I sat across the desk from her, my hands clenched in my lap. I started by explaining the situation in clinical terms. I suspect my husband is having an affair and is commingling assets. Carol listened, her expression unreadable. She just nodded. Do you have any specific concerns? Bank accounts? Credit cards? I took a deep breath and made a decision. I couldn't do this halfway. I had to trust her. I believe my husband has been lying to me for years about a significant medical diagnosis, I began, and then I told her everything. I told her about the email, the infertility, the medical report, the birthday dinner. I laid out the entire sordid story. When I finished, Carol was silent for a moment. She looked at the file she'd started, then back at me. For the first time, a flicker of something other than professionalism crossed her face. It was a grim sort of respect. Okay, she said, her voice firm. This isn't a standard infidelity case. This is a long con. You're right to be looking at the money. Men like this, they build escape hatches out of cash. She explained her process, her fees. It was expensive, but as I wrote the check for the retainer, it didn't feel like an expense. It felt like I was buying back my own life. The following 10 days were an exercise in extreme self-control. I was living with the enemy, a man whose every move I was now scrutinizing. I had to maintain the illusion of normalcy, which was both exhausting and terrifying. One night, he came home with a bouquet of my favorite flowers, lilies. Just because, he said, smiling as he kissed me. I know things have been stressful lately. I just want you to know I love you. The old Zoe would have melted. The new Zoe saw the gesture for what it was, an insurance policy. He was shoring up his alibi, making sure the part of the devoted, loving husband was played to perfection before the final act. I smiled back, my face an aching mask. Thank you, honey. They're beautiful. I put them in a vase and watched them slowly wilt on our dining room table all week, a perfect metaphor for our marriage. During this time, I was an actress. I'd ask about the big project at work, and he'd launch into elaborate, detailed lies about blueprints and client demands. I'd listen intently, nodding, my mind a cold, silent vault, storing every lie. He was so confident, so pleased with his own deception. He had no idea he was talking to the one person in the world who knew the truth. Finally, Carol called. "I have my preliminary report," she said. "I think you should come in." I was back in her office the next day, my heart hammering against my ribs. She didn't waste time with small talk. She laid a thin folder on the desk between us. "Your husband is a busy man," she began, her tone dry. "But not at the office. His keycard records show he's been leaving his firm by 5:30 almost every night for the past 6 months. Sometimes earlier, so the late nights were a lie. I had known, but seeing the proof was a fresh stab. His personal finances were clean," she continued. "Paycheck goes in, mortgage goes out. But his corporate expense account is another story." She slid a spreadsheet across the desk. It was a list of dozens of payments to vendors I had never heard of. I did some digging. These companies, Apex Design Solutions, Pacific Coast Surveyors, they're shell corporations. They exist only on paper. The address for all of them is the same P.O. box, which is registered to... She paused for effect. "Your sister." I stared at the paper, my vision blurring. "Over the last 18 months, Carol said, her voice a flat, factual drone. "Your husband has embezzled $217,000 from his firm through fake vendor invoices. $200,000. The number was staggering. It was the stuff of crime shows, not my life. Where did it go?" I whispered. Carol slid another document from the folder. It was a property deed. He used the bulk of it as a down payment on a house, a 3-bedroom Craftsman in Tacoma. I looked at the name on the deed. I was expecting to see his name, or Chloe's, but the name printed in crisp. Black letters made my blood run cold. It was my mother's. "The deed is in your mother's name," Carol confirmed, seeing the shock on my face. Clean and clear. A gift, I imagine. Hard to trace back to him. My own mother. My mother, who had watched my heart break for years, who had patted my hand and told me my time would come. She wasn't just a bystander. She was an active accomplice. She was holding the keys to their new life, a life built with stolen money and my tears. The cage my parents had built for me in childhood hadn't disappeared. It had just expanded. There was one more page. A summary of a bank account I had never seen before. It was in Chloe's name. For the past year, it had received a steady infusion of cash from the shell corporations. The transaction history was a roadmap of her life. Monthly rent payments for a luxury apartment. A loan payment for a new convertible. Thousands of dollars in credit card bills from Gucci, Nordstrom, and expensive salons. It was all there. A comprehensive, detailed blueprint of their betrayal. This wasn't a simple, messy affair born of passion. This was a cold, calculated business transaction. They were a team. Ryan, Chloe, and my mother, and their business was the complete and utter demolition of my life for their own personal gain. I sat there, staring at the papers, and the fire inside me that had been lit by the medical report now roared into an inferno. The pain was still there, a deep foundational ache, but it was being burned away, leaving something harder and more resolute in its place. I looked up at Carol. My voice, when I spoke, was steady. "My birthday is in 3 days," I said. "I need you to make pristine, easy-to-read copies of all of this." The day of my 32nd birthday dawned gray and overcast, the Seattle sky a perfect mirror of my soul, but there was no storm inside me. There was only a profound and unnerving calm. I was a soldier on the morning of a battle, every sense heightened, every nerve ending singing with a quiet, focused energy. The time for grief and rage was over. Tonight was about execution. Ryan woke up and wished me a happy birthday with a kiss that felt like a spider on my lips. He gave me a gift, a beautiful, expensive necklace, a guilt offering, an ornament for the sacrificial lamb. "I want tonight to be perfect," he said, his eyes full of fake sincerity. "You deserve it. I'm sure it will be a night to remember," I replied, my voice smooth as glass. I fastened the necklace, its cold metal a familiar weight against my skin, and smiled at him in the mirror. He smiled back, utterly clueless. He was looking at his wife, but he was seeing a ghost. I spent the day preparing. I didn't bake a cake or plan an outfit for a celebration. I went to a copy shop and printed 3 beautiful, high-quality copies of Ryan's medical report and the executive summary Carol, the PI, had prepared on the financial conspiracy. I placed each set in a crisp manila envelope. They were my party favors. Getting ready that evening was a ritual. I chose my dress with the care of a general choosing his armor. It was a simple, elegant sheath dress in a deep blood red. It was a color of power, not of victimhood. I did my makeup with a steady hand, creating a mask of cool composure. When I looked in the mirror, I saw the woman they had created, the strong one, the responsible one, the one who handles things. Tonight, I would handle them. The drive to Glass Haven was thick with attention only I could feel. Ryan made small talk, pointing out landmarks, commenting on the traffic. He was nervous, but he thought it was the nervous energy of a man about to blow up his own life. He had no idea I was the one holding the detonator. We arrived at the restaurant. My parents and Chloe were already there, seated in a private room with a panoramic view of the glittering city lights on the water. They all stood up, a chorus of "Happy Birthday" ringing out. It sounded like a death knell. My mother hugged me, her perfume cloying. "You look beautiful, dear," she said, her eyes not quite meeting mine. She was a bad liar. My father hugged me with his usual awkward heartiness, oblivious as always. And then Chloe. She embraced me, her cheek cool against mine, and whispered in my ear, "You're going to want to remember tonight." "Oh, I will," I whispered back, pulling away with a small, secret smile. The first part of the dinner was a surreal performance. They feigned normalcy, asking me about my week, pretending to celebrate me. All the while, I could feel the coiled energy in the room, the anticipation of the coming explosion. Chloe was practically vibrating with smug excitement. Ryan kept glancing at her, a tiny, almost imperceptible nod passing between them. My mother was fidgety, shredding her cocktail napkin into a pile of white lint. They were all such terrible actors. I played my part. I was quiet, demure, smiling faintly as they talked. I let them believe I was the same old Zoe, the passive observer in my own life. I let them fill the silence, watching as they orchestrated their own downfall. The waiter cleared the appetizer plates. This was it. The moment Chloe had detailed in her email, the moment the show was scheduled to begin. As if on cue, Chloe pushed her chair back slightly and stood up. She placed her hand on her flat stomach, a gesture of such practiced false maternal grace that it was almost comical. She had a radiant, triumphant smile on her face. She looked like an angel of destruction. "I have an announcement," she said, her voice clear and strong, cutting through the low murmur of the main dining room beyond our doors. The table fell silent. My parents looked at her with rapt attention. Ryan fixed his gaze on his water glass, the perfect picture of a man caught in a difficult situation. "I'm pregnant," Chloe announced, her eyes shining. She paused, letting the words settle. Then her gaze swung like a weapon directly to me. "It's Ryan's." The silence that followed was a physical thing. It pressed in on my ears. I saw the gasps, the shocked looks on my parents' faces, a little too practiced to be real. And then every eye in the room landed on me. This was my moment, my cue to shatter. I could feel their collective will pressing down, expecting, demanding my collapse. Chloe's smirk was wide and predatory. Ryan finally looked at me, his face a perfect, sorrowful mask of pity. My mother had a hand to her mouth, her eyes wide with fake horror. They waited, and they waited. I did not cry. I did not scream. I did not even flinch. I held Chloe's gaze for a long moment, and I let a slow, genuine smile spread across my face. I picked up my wine glass, the red liquid swirling like blood. I raised it high. My voice, when I spoke, was not the trembling whisper of a victim. It was calm, clear, and carried the weight of every lie I had ever been told. "Well," I said, my smile unwavering, "it seems a toast is in order." I looked around the table, making eye contact with each of them in turn. My sister, my husband, my mother, my father, my conspirators. "To family," I said, the word dripping with an irony so thick it was suffocating, and all its complicated truths. And speaking of the truth, my other hand moved to my purse, which sat on the chair beside me. I pulled out one of the manila envelopes. I didn't throw it. I didn't slam it on the table. With a single deliberate motion, I slid it across the polished wood surface. It glided silently, perfectly, coming to a stop directly in front of Ryan's plate. He stared at it as if it were a snake. "Happy birthday to me," I said softly. "Why don't you open your gift?" The room was so quiet I could hear the frantic, panicked thumping of my own heart. But on the outside, I was a statue of calm. Ryan stared at the plain manila envelope as if it contained a bomb. In a way, it did. Chloe's triumphant smirk had faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. My parents exchanged a nervous glance. "This was not in the script." "What is this, Zoe?" Ryan asked, his voice tight. He tried to sound dismissive, but a note of fear had crept in. "I believe the contents concern you," I replied, my voice dangerously sweet. "Go on, open it." With hesitant fingers, he lifted the flap and pulled out the single sheet of paper inside. I knew the exact moment his eyes processed the masthead. Cascade Clinic. I watched his face, and it was like watching a building collapse in slow motion. The color drained from his cheeks, leaving behind a pasty gray pallor. His eyes, wide with disbelief, scanned the page. He saw the date. He saw the columns of clinical data. And then he saw the 2 words at the bottom of the page that sealed his fate. Functionally sterile. His jaw went slack. He looked from the paper to me, his eyes screaming a question he couldn't ask. There was no recognition of his own guilt, only pure, baffled shock at having been caught. Chloe, growing impatient, leaned over. "Ryan, what is it?" she snapped. Her eyes fell on the report. She wouldn't have understood the medical terms, but she saw the look on Ryan's face, and her smug confidence began to visibly crumble. I decided it was time to provide some clarification for the rest of the audience. "That," I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel, "is a medical report from 2019. It seems that when Ryan told me all his tests came back fine, he was lying. The report says he has 0 sperm motility. In simpler terms for you, Chloe, it means Ryan is sterile. He can't have children. He has never been able to have children." I let that hang in the air for a moment. I watched the implication land, watched the gears turn behind their stunned eyes. Then, I turned my gaze fully on my sister. The predatory smirk was gone, replaced by a mask of horrified confusion. "So, a big congratulations on your pregnancy, Chloe," I said, my voice dripping with ice. "But I think we're all dying to know. If it's not Ryan's, who's the father?" A collective gasp went around the table. My father's face was a mottled red. My mother looked like she was going to be sick. But Chloe completely fell apart. The meltdown they had so carefully planned for me was happening to her, and it was a spectacular sight. "What?" That's not true!" she shrieked, her voice shrill and ugly. She turned on Ryan, her eyes wild with panic. "Ryan, tell her it's not true. Tell her!" Ryan couldn't speak. He just sat there, clutching the piece of paper, staring at me with a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. He wasn't sorry. He was just sorry he had been exposed. "You told me you had it handled." Chloe screamed at him, her voice cracking. "You told me it was all taken care of." I don't know," he stammered, finally finding his voice. "I don't know what this is. It's fake. She faked it." "Did I asked calmly. "Or did you just forget about the tests you took before you sent me on a 3-year journey through medical hell? Did you forget while you held me as I cried about being broken? Did you forget while you let me inject my body with hormones and subject myself to test after test? All while you held this little secret?" My words struck him like physical blows. He flinched, but I wasn't done. The first bomb had detonated. It was time for the second. I turned my attention to my mother. She was frozen, her face a mask of white terror. "You know, it's funny how secrets travel in this family," I continued, my tone conversational. I reached into my purse and pulled out the second envelope, placing it gently on the table. I was so confused about how Ryan and Chloe were planning to afford their new life together. It's expensive starting a family, but then I found the answer. I looked directly at my mother, and her eyes widened in terror. "She knew. That lovely new house in Tacoma," I said, letting the words fall like stones. "The one you so graciously put in your name. Did you know it was purchased with embezzled money? $200,000 to be exact. Stolen by Ryan from his firm over the last 18 months. My father, who had been watching the scene with a look of stunned horror, finally spoke. "What are you talking about?" "Embezzled. What house?" "Oh, Dad," I said, a wave of genuine pity washing over me for this clueless man. "You really don't know, do you? Mom, Ryan, and Chloe have been very busy. They've been building a whole new life. It's quite the family project." I leaned forward slightly. "The investigators found everything. The shell corporations registered to Chloe, the secret bank accounts, the wire transfers. They were very thorough. I'm sure they'll have some questions for you, Mom. Aiding and abetting is a serious crime." That's when the chaos erupted. It was no longer a quiet, tense standoff. It was a full-scale implosion. Chloe was sobbing hysterically, screaming at Ryan that he had ruined her life. Ryan was shouting back, calling her a stupid idiot for getting pregnant by someone else. My father was on his feet, yelling at my mother, "What have you done, Carol? What in God's name have you done?" My mother was silent, her face ashen, her entire world crumbling around her. They were a storm of their own making, a vortex of greed, lies, and betrayal, all swirling around each other. They had forgotten I was even there, and in that moment, I felt a profound sense of release. I was no longer a part of their system. I was not the gravity holding them together. I was a free agent, a spectator at their self-inflicted demolition. Quietly, I stood up. I placed my red napkin on the table beside my uneaten dinner. Ryan saw the movement and his head snapped towards me. "Zoe, wait," he pleaded, a desperate, pathetic sound. I looked at him, at all of them, one last time. They were no longer my family. They were just a collection of broken, greedy people I used to know. Without a word, I turned and walked out of the room, leaving them to scream in the ruins. The sound of their yelling followed me down the hall, but by the time I stepped out into the cool, clean Seattle night, it had already begun to fade. The fallout was swift and spectacular. Just as I had walked away from the chaos at the restaurant, I walked away from the ensuing legal and personal wreckage. I didn't stick around to watch them burn. I had my own life to build from the ashes. I heard about most of it through Mia, who took a grim satisfaction in relaying the news. An anonymous tip, complete with a full copy of the private investigator's report, was sent to Ryan's firm and the local police department. Ryan was fired immediately and arrested a week later on charges of felony embezzlement. He took a plea deal and is now serving a 3-year prison sentence. Chloe's world collapsed. The true father of her child, a married real estate developer, wanted nothing to do with her or the public scandal. Humiliated and broke, she sold her convertible, left her luxury apartment, and disappeared. The last I heard, she had moved to another state to live with a distant relative. The bright star of our family finally extinguished in a cloud of shame. My mother, facing criminal charges as an accomplice, was forced to cooperate fully with the investigation. She avoided jail time, but had to sell the Tacoma house to help pay back the money Ryan had stolen. She and my father are still together, but their marriage, like their finances and their reputation, is in ruins. They tried to call me dozens of times. I never answered. There was nothing left to say. I filed for divorce the day after my birthday. I sold our house, the one with the yellow room and the ghost of a dream, and I didn't look back. I used my share of the money to get a small, quiet apartment in Fremont, a neighborhood filled with art and life. It has a small balcony that overlooks a canal, and it is the first place that has ever felt truly like my own. I didn't fall apart, but I didn't magically heal overnight either. There were days when the grief was a physical weight, days when the phantom limb of my old life ached with a dull, persistent pain. But for the first time, I wasn't absorbing anyone else's drama. I had only my own feelings to process, and I gave them the space they deserved. I started taking a pottery class on Tuesday nights. There is something profoundly healing about taking a formless, messy lump of clay and shaping it into something solid, beautiful, and useful. My hands, which had trembled with anxiety for so long, became steady and strong. I filled my apartment with my lopsided, imperfect creations, bowls, mugs, and vases. They were mine. I bought an orchid, a delicate, finicky plant I was sure I would kill. But I learned what it needed. Not too much water, not too much sun, the right kind of light, the right environment. One day, a few months after I moved in, it bloomed. And I finally understood. For 32 years, they had made me believe I was the problem. They had told me I was strong, but they had treated me like I was barren ground, a place where nothing beautiful could grow. They were wrong. I wasn't broken. I was just planted in the wrong garden. Here, in the quiet light of my own life, I was finally starting to bloom. If this story hit you, give it a like, subscribe, and comment your city. Have you ever faced betrayal like this? Your voice matters here.